She stood before the judge and said with confidence, "A frightening rage lies beneath everything I have done. I must be executed because if you release me from prison, I will do that again." During the period from December 1989 AD until September 1990 AD, the police found bodies and abandoned cars on the highway in northern and central Florida. They were victims of a serial killer who was stalking them just as a spider stalks its victim to trap him in its web. She was standing next to the road, decorated with her elegant clothes, her blonde hair, and her charming brown eyes. Even if the car driver stopped and agreed with her to have sex in exchange for money, she took him behind the trees of the forest and shot him with her gun, then threw his body and fled in his car. After a period of time, the police found his body thrown in the forest and his car parked on the outskirts of the city. Who is Aileen Wuornos? She was born on February 29, 1956, in the city of Rochester, located in the American state of Michigan. Her mother, Diana Wuornos, was 15 years old when she married Leo Dale Pittman in 1954, less than 2 years and 2 months before the birth of Aileen. The couple divorced. Diana Wuornos abandoned her daughter in January 1960, when she was 4 years old. She and her older brother, Keith, were moved to the home of her grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, who adopted them in 1960. Aileen did not know parental tenderness, because her mother abandoned her and her father was suffering from schizophrenia. He was accused of sexual crimes against children and committed suicide by hanging himself in a cell in 1969. Her life with her grandparents was not good as they treated her badly, because she reminds them of their naughty daughter who ran away from home, and their belief that she would become like her mother, and as a result of those circumstances, Aileen had sexual relations at school for food and drugs when she was 11 years old, and she also had a sexual relationship with her brother, Keith. These relationships expanded, as her grandfather forced her to be naked in front of him, and to take off her clothes. He would beat her and sexually assault her when he was drunk. What made matters worse was that she was raped by her grandfather's friends, and she became pregnant at the age of 14, in the year 1970 AD. She gave birth in a maternity home for unmarried women and left her child for adoption there. Then she was expelled from school, and her problems worsened after the death of her grandmother. A year later, her grandfather expelled her from the house, so she began working as a prostitute, having sex for money, and she got involved in many problems with the police. In 1974, I was arrested in Jefferson City, Colorado, on charges of driving under the influence of drugs and shooting from a car. In 1976, I moved to live in Florida, where I met Louis Gratz-Fell, an old man in the mid-70s. He owns a yacht club, but she only stayed with him for 1 month because of her quarrel with him. She hit him on the head with a stick and fled to her town in Michigan, where she was arrested for disturbing the public peace. In 1976, her brother Keith died of throat cancer, and Aileen obtained $10,000 as an insurance policy on his life. She divorced her old husband in the same year. She bought a car and moved to live in Florida again, in the city of Dayton Beach in 1986, where she met her. It was about a lesbian girl named Tyra Moore. She lived with her for 4 years and had the happiest years of her life, even though she caused a lot of problems with the police and was arrested several times on charges of armed robbery of stores and forging a bank check. Highway corpses. In a strange and repeated manner, the police found the bodies of male victims killed on the highway and among the forests in central and northern Florida from December 1989 to September 1990. The victims were as follows. 1. Richard Mallory, 51 years old, owner of a store that sells electrical and electronic tools. On December 1, 1989, his car was found parked on the side of the road. On December 13, his body was found in the forest near the road, suffering from several bullet wounds, including 2 bullets in the left lung, which caused his death. 2. David Spears, 43 years old, a contract gardener. His body was found on May 1, 1990. He was completely naked except for a baseball cap that he was wearing on his head. The body was hit with 6 bullet wounds to the chest and abdomen from a 22mm pistol. 3. Charles Carsdon, 40 years old. He worked in a cow herding competition. His body was found on May 6, 1990. He was shot with 9 bullets in the lower part of the chest and upper part of the abdomen. 4. Troy Burris, 50 years old, a sausage seller, was reported missing on July 31, 1990 AD, and his body was found on August 4, 1990 AD. It was severely decomposed and had 2 bullet wounds. 5. Charles Dick Humphreys, 56 years old, a retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force. They found his body on September 12, 1990. He was fully dressed and had 6 gunshot wounds to the head and body. 6. Walter Gino Antonio, 62 years old. They found his body on November 19, 1990. His body was almost naked in the forest and he had been shot 4 times in the head. Chase and arrest the thug. Peter Sims, 65 years old, traveled in May 1990 from Florida to New Jersey. He was not found, but the police found his car on July 4, 1990. Eyewitnesses told the police that they saw Aileen Wuornos and Tyra Moore dropping us off. From the victim's car, the police also found Aileen's handprints on the car's front door handle. They also found some of the victim's items in used materials stores that had Aileen Wuornos' fingerprints on them, but she was using forged identity cards, including, her aunt's name is Lori. Judy, Susan Plavk, and Cammie Marsh moved with these names between 3 states, Colorado, Michigan, and Florida, causing confusion and delaying the police investigations, but they concluded that all of these names were fictitious and false. It leads to the same accused, Aileen Wuornos. The police arrested Aileen Wuornos on January 9, 1991 in one of the bars where she was drinking alcohol, but they did not tell her that they had exposed her, but rather charged her with impersonation and forgery, and within days they arrested her mistress, Tyra Moore, who confessed to Aileen. In fact, she showed them the places where Aileen hid the weapon used in the crimes, a 22mm pistol, and the items stolen from the victims. Therefore, she was considered a witness in the case, and on January 16, 1991, Aileen confessed after she was interrogated and found that she had killed Richard Mallory, but she said that she was defending herself because he had tried to rape her. The strange thing was that when the police opened the dead man's record, they found that he had a long record of attempted rape and harassment, and after a long time she confessed to killing the other 6 victims, also of the same person. The reason is because they tried to rape her. The serial killer trial. During her trial in Florida, Aileen Wuornos insisted that she was defending herself against those who tried to rape her, and she even screamed at the judge and said, "I am innocent, you took my life and I will take revenge." On January 27, 1992, she was convicted of murdering Richard Mallory. During her long trial, she claimed that the prison guards had harassed her and treated her badly, to the point that they were spitting in the food served to her. Of course, she said this without proof, and after several long trials, Aileen Wuornos admitted that she had killed her 7 victims with premeditation for the purpose of robbery, and that she preferred the death penalty, and she refused the lawyer's defense of her. Thus, the court sentenced her to death by lethal injection on January 31, 1992, so she joined the group. List of those awaiting execution. The case of Aileen Wuornos became famous because she was the first American serial killer in the modern era, in addition to some people's sympathy for her because of the miserable life she lived. She appeared on several television programs, including the famous Oprah Winfrey program, and a film called Monster was made in 1993, which was shown at the film festival. New York, in which American actress Charlize Theron starred and won an Oscar. Execution of the serial killer. On Wednesday, October 9, 2002, at 7 o'clock in the morning, the policeman entered the cell of Aileen Wuornos and gave her her last meal, which was a cup of coffee with a KFC meal. Then they took her to the execution chamber, where she went with them and she was very calm and said her last words, "I just want to say that I am sailing with the Rock, but I will return like Independence Day on June 6, I will definitely return. She was tied to the bed and 2 intravenous injections were inserted into her hands. Then she opened the curtain so that the victims' families, journalists, and judges could see her. She was moving her head and eyes in a funny way and mocking them. The execution began at 9:32 and ended at 9:47, and I closed my eyes. Aileen Wuornos, forever. After her death, her body was cremated and her ashes were given to her childhood friend, Dawn Botkins, who took the ashes and scattered them on the trees of the Michigan forest, according to her will, where she lived. How is execution carried out by lethal injection? The criminal is tied to a special bed so that his body does not move except his head. Then 2 intravenous catheters are installed, one of which is used only as a precaution in case the first one malfunctions. Then sensors are installed to measure the heartbeat to confirm the criminal's death. Later, the criminal is injected with poison and he dies within 7 to 11 minutes. The poison consists of 3 components, the amount of which is estimated according to the size of the criminal's body, and they are injected in the following order. 1. Sodium pentothal, which causes paralysis and loss of consciousness within 45 seconds. 2. Potassium chloride, which causes the heart to stop within 30 seconds and is very painful. 3. Pancuronium bromide, which causes paralysis of the lungs and cessation of breathing, and is the last injection to ensure the death of the criminal. In conclusion, whoever lives a life like the life of the heroine of our story will not become a doctor, engineer, or teacher, but will certainly become a criminal. I noticed that almost all of her victims were elderly people, and this indicates that she had developed a psychological complex because of her grandfather and his friends. She said at the end of her life, "I will return." I believe that her ghost will return to inhabit the bodies of children who have been wronged by the family and society, so that they may grow up and become criminals, murderers, and thugs. Do you, dear viewer, think that Aileen Wuornos is a criminal or a victim? Before we finish, do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell to receive true crime stories. If you have any comments, feel free.